I'm amazed, as an old ex-trumpet player, I'm amazed at what these guys are doing tonight. This is one of the best trumpet sections. In their honor, I want to tell you this little anecdote. This is something that really happened. I hope some of you are old enough to remember World War II. Okay, there was, for the younger people, during World War II, they had something called savings bonds. And you would, if you were in elementary school, you'd buy a savings stamp for 10 cents. And when you put it in a book and when you got it filled, it totaled $17.50. And you went and you bought what they call a war bond. That money was used to, for ammunition for World War II. And then when the bond matured in several years, it was worth $25. So it was a big deal, and all the movie stars went on the road and they all sold bonds. Anyway, the biggest fundraiser ever held during World War II was at Carnegie Hall in New York City. And it was Toscanini, the greatest conductor that ever lived, conducting the NBC Philharmonic. And in the middle, they wanted to do something special. And so they had this trio set up. It consisted of, on piano, Harry Truman, who was the President of the United States. It included, on trumpet, Jimmy Petrillo, the founder of the Musicians Union, who's a crazy old guy. Well, he's a trumpet player. And on violin, a little-known violinist by the name of Albert Einstein. And they were to do one song in the middle of the concert. And of course everybody heard about it, and the tickets sold out at like $10,000 each in half a minute, and Carnegie Hall was packed, and they raised a ton of money. And anyway, Harry Truman insisted that they all play the Missouri Waltz. It's kind of a dumb little waltz in the key of A flat. It's the only thing he knew. And he was the president, so he was sort of busy. There was a war on. And so Albert Einstein, who really didn't play the violin anymore, but he got it out and woodshed it a little, he decided that he would learn the Missouri Waltz, and Jimmy Petrillo learned it on trumpet. So they came out to huge applause, and they bowed to each other, and they started playing the Missouri Waltz. And it was passable. It was a little off-key, but it was passable, and people had tears in their eyes. And because they were amateurs, not really professional musicians, about halfway through the song, the time got a little messed up. And so Jimmy Petrillo, the trumpet player, took his horn down and turned to Albert Einstein and said, "Can't you count?" Only a trumpet player can do that. That's a true story. I didn't tell you about this alto player from New York City, alto sax player. This is a true story. This guy couldn't get any work, and he was so depressed, and he thought maybe a change of venue will help my life out. So he sold everything but his sax, and a couple extra reeds, and he moved to London, got a cold water flat, 3rd floor, no elevator. And it rained night and day like it usually does in London. The weather was terrible, chilly, damp, and he was living on crackers and beer. He was just about out of money, and he was ready to give up, man. And then all of a sudden he wakes one morning and the sun is shining brightly, coming in through the windows, glaring through the shade, and he thought, hey, maybe this is a sign. The weather's been so stinky, and I haven't gotten one call for a gig or nothing. So he went over and he put up the shade, and then not only was the sun shining, but the rain had just ceased, and so the water molecules were still in there, and it created a rainbow, and the rainbow just filled this entire sky. It was magnificent. The colors were so vivid, and he stared at it for the longest time. And the sun, of course, moved slightly, and the rainbow was still there, and it started to shine on his alto saxophone. And he thought, you know what, this is corny, but this is from the heart. And so he opened the window, and he picked up his alto sax, and he played the most appropriate song he could think of, the great Harold Arlen ballad, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And a small crowd gathered. There were 11 people. And they shouted, they said, "You're good, lad. You're wonderful." And he thought, this is the beginning. But he got to the middle part of the song and he forgot it. Now this never happened before, but he figured maybe because of the excitement, I'll start at the beginning again, and this time it'll come natural. And the crowd grew to 39 people. And they said, you're wonderful, lad, but finish the song, finish the whole song. And he got to the middle and he forgot it again. And he thought, how could this happen? He started at the beginning over and over, and every time he got to the middle, he forgot it. Now the crowd had grown to thousands of people, and they became surly and said, finish the song, stupid! I said, how could this be? This was my day, and now everything has turned sour. Life stinks. And he took that saxophone and he smashed it against the windowsill, rendering it irreparably unplayable. And he threw his worthless body out that window and crashed 3 stories to the pavement below. And just as he was dying, the British ambulance pulled up with the siren going, doo 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 doo. I get security out here. A lot of old people there shouldn't be getting this excited, you know. It's easy for you kids, but a lot of geezers here. Nothing wrong with being old. Except people start telling me that you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing. Like this is a true story. This woman said to her husband, you shouldn't be driving. He said, wait a minute, I'm not going that far. And the car doesn't just represent transportation, it represents a sense of independence. And she said, well, I'm really worried. He says, I'm taking the car. And then she said the worst thing she could say. She said, then take the cell phone the children bought you for Christmas in case you get lost or something. Oh, he hated the phone and he hated this phone. So he said, all right, so he grabbed this stupid phone and the car keys and took off. And it's about 2 hours later, the phone rings and she answered it. And he said, it's me, I'm only a few minutes from the house on the freeway and I told you nothing would go wrong. She said, well, thank God, but please be careful. I just heard on the news there's some idiot driving the wrong way on the freeway. He said, there are thousands of them.